So hello guys and welcome back to another video. So last night I was watching the Chess24 stream and it was one game. I said this is the last game, I'm gonna stay and watch it, and I was not disappointed because this game, Levon Aronian has to win this game in order to tie the set against Magnus Carlsen, and the game was a crazy one. I've watched this live and I saw the analysis. So let me present you this game. So we have d4 by Aronian, and one second. Okay, we have d4 by Aronian, and we have knight f6, knight f3, e6, and bishop f4. So we have a London system. On the board we have b6 going for a Queen's Indian kind of like setup. We have e3 now, bishop b7, and bishop d3, bishop e5, h3, and c5. Now Magnus attacks from the queen side flank, and this position is perfectly normal. We have c3, c takes d4, and now e takes d4, castles, d6, and now rook to e1, knight b to d7, a4, a6, bishop g3, rook e8, knight a3, and bishop f8. And so now Magnus, after knight c4 and queen to c7 and knight f to d2, Magnus makes a big decision here. Now Magnus, could play a calm move, or not really a calm move, but a move like e5, for example, and then just you say that you cannot take me on e5. I'm just gonna take with the knight, and now my knight is active. And if you try to take with the knight, for example, I'm just gonna take with the d pawn, and now this pawn is perfectly protected. You cannot attack it, and I'm in a very good position. But Magnus here goes for b5, and okay, if you go for after b5, if you go for example for a takes b5 and a takes b5 and now knight to a3, there are ideas like b4 and after c takes b4, white's pawn structure is just very bad. And although the computer says that this is fine, maybe a move like queen to b6, and then you can just go knight d to c4 and just give up the pawn. But I mean, this position is just bad for white. I would not play this, and I agree with Levon here. He plays knight a3 straight up. So now if you go for an idea like b4, now it doesn't work. Simply c takes on b4, and now you don't have anything. Now white is threatening to make connected pass pawns on the queen side, and that's very bad. So here we have, after knight a3, we have b takes on a4 by Magnus, and now we have queen takes on a4. And after this queen takes on a4, we have bishop c6, and now queen c2. And here, Magnus makes another small inaccuracy. He goes queen b7, and here maybe he missed that Levon has knight a to c4, and I'm gonna show you in a minute what happens. Actually, I'm gonna show it now. Bishop takes on g2. You cannot go for that because simply knight a5, and now you cannot defend this bishop. For example, queen d5, bishop c4, and queen g5. Now white just captures the bishop, and this is a completely winning position. So here maybe after this queen c2, instead of queen b7, maybe you could play a move like e5, knight a to c4, and now maybe you can even go for a move like e4, and for example, after bishop e2 or bishop f1, now you can go for a5, and now you deny access from the knight to d5 square, and maybe you're actually in a good position, in a better position. But anyways, Magnus went for queen b7, and after knight a to c4, of course he did not take on g2. He went back queen to c7, and he lost a tempo, and this tempo loss allows Levon to just go knight a5, and knight a5. Magnus went for rook a7, and here, for example, you could maybe say that why did Magnus not save his bishop? Well, let's say he went for bishop d5. Now this just allows c4, and what are you gonna do? We're gonna go rook a to c8, and of course you cannot take the bishop. The pawn is pinned to the queen. And after queen a4 and bishop a8, okay, you have saved the bishop, but your position is just completely very bad. I mean, you cannot do anything. Your pieces are very passive, and this knight is just controlling a lot of good squares here. So instead of bishop d5 and saving the bishop, Magnus just played rook a7, and Levon took on c6. We have queen takes on c6, and now b4, taking space on the queen side. We have rook to c8, now attacking the c3 pawn, and c4, defending it. And now Magnus has to create some counterplay. Here he could maybe take it slow, play a move like g6, and then Levon could play knight f3 and things like that. But Magnus here tries to create counterplay, and he plays e5. And here we have d takes on e5, and here we have knight takes on e5. You could take with the d pawn here, for example, but this just allows c5, and now white really has a lot of space on the queen side. So Magnus took with the knight, and we have bishop f1. Rook b7 now, attacking the b pawn, and queen b3. Rook c to b8, adding another attacker, and now Levon goes for b5. We have a takes on b5, c takes on b5, and now queen to b6. And okay, well, Levon has a passed b pawn, Magnus has a passed d pawn, but Levon's b pawn is definitely stronger. And here, after this c takes on b5, the computer says that you can, instead of queen to b6, maybe you can just capture this pawn with the rook. Bishop takes on b5, rook takes on b5, and now, for example, a move like queen a4 and queen d5. But I mean, although the computer says that black is okay, doing not very good, but okay, I don't think that Magnus would go into this, and so he did not go. We have queen to b6, and now we have knight to c4. And this knight to c4 move trades knights, and we have Magnus activates his bishop, and we have rook to c8, rook to a6, and queen to c5. Now bishop d3, as the bishop was under attack. We have d5 and bishop f4. And here, Magnus begins to mobilize his pieces. We have knight to e4, and now bishop e3, attacking the queen, and now d4. And here, the computer, Levon played bishop f4, but here the computer really likes bishop takes on d4, because you get rid of the threat and you capture a pawn. We have queen takes on d4, now bishop takes on e4. And here, for example, you have to move the rook as it's under attack, and there are not a lot of good squares. I mean, let's say you, for example, go back to, you go back to b8, right? And then there simply is bishop d5, and now who's guarding the f7 pawn? You can play a move like queen d2, but I mean, white is just dominating here. And actually, in this position, not rook e to a1, rook a to e1. I read that wrong. And now black is lost. Black is just lost. You cannot guard this f7 square and not be too passive. So instead of that, here after d4 we have bishop f4 by Levon, but this allows knight to c3, and after rook to e5 attacking the queen, now I have queen b4, and the queen trade is more or less forced. We have queen takes on b4, bishop takes on b4, and now g4 by Levon. He said that the queen side is locked, let's attack on the king side. So we have g6, king g2 now, and rook c to b8, now attacking the b pawn. And we have rook e1. The players were very low on time. Right now I think Levon had around 10 seconds, so he had to repeat moves to gain some time. Rook d8, bishop g5, rook to back to b8, bishop f4, rook back to d8, rook e5, and rook back to b8. And now if he goes back rook e1, he's gonna run into a threefold repetition, and he has to win this game. So he went rook c6. Now Magnus here, I think he rushed it, but he was also low on time, and the b pawn looks like a free pawn, so he grabbed it. But this allows rook to d5, and after knight a7, the only move. And now if you take the rook, I mean, black just takes the rook, and this is a complete draw, you know. You have to move the bishop back, and oops, have to move the bishop back, and now you don't have anything. You don't have anything here. Instead of that, after knight a7, Levon had to prolong the game. He went rook back to c1. Now the rook is still under attack, so Magnus moves it. We have rook e8, and now we have rook b1, and this is a very important move because it pins the bishop, and if you're, let's say, not careful and just defend it with the knight, this does not work because of rook b5. And after this rook b5, we have rook, let's say rook captures on b5, bishop captures, rook e6, bishop captures on c6, rook captures on c6, and now we just lose a piece, and you're completely losing the game. So instead of that, of course, Magnus does not blunder like that. We have rook b6, and we have bishop to c7 now, attacking the rook. Rook to c6 now with a tempo on the bishop, and again, if Levon were to just trade here, the position would be, again, very, very drawish. The chances would be very, very small, 3 pawns each on the king side. Okay, Levon has a bishop, but I don't think he can do anything more than a draw here. We have rook to c6, and now rook to d7, protecting the bishop, keeping the tension. Maybe Magnus makes a mistake. And we have rook to e7, trying to trade rooks. Of course, Levon does not trade. He goes rook to d8 check. We have king to g7, and now he moves the bishop out of the way. We have bishop f4, and Magnus also gets his bishop out of danger. We have bishop a5. And now Levon goes rook a8. This is, I mean, a crazy position. You cannot move the knight, you're gonna lose the bishop, but Magnus goes rook to c8. We have, instead of rook captures on c8, a normal looking move, we have rook b to b8. Rook captures on b8, bishop captures on b8, and now bishop b6, just defending the knight. Now a series of kind of forced moves by Levon. We have bishop d6, rook d7, bishop f8 check, and king f6. And here Levon played rook b8, and this rook b8 really allows Magnus pretty sturdy defense. Bishop d8 is just you know, completely drawing the game, because now you disallow the rook access to the e8 square, and what is white going to do? Play what, f4? If he plays f4, simply knight c6, kicking the rook out, rook b1, and now just bishop e7, and it doesn't matter. A move like g5 doesn't work, just king e6, and you know, the king looks funny here. You know, you can check him once maybe, but the king is actually safe. The king is very safe here, and white doesn't have anything. But after this rook b8 attacking the bishop, Magnus, low on the clock, he played bishop a5, and now this allows rook to e8, and the situation is now not so clear. We have bishop c7, and this, I think, was the losing blunder, because this allows h4. After this rook to e8, maybe you could try to bring in the knight, for example, knight to c6, and you know, after this h4 move, now maybe you had knight e7, and here maybe you could have survived. For example, a move like bishop c4 was possible, but you just defend the knight, and again, the position is not clear, but I think the chances Magnus had were better in this position. But anyways, here we have bishop c7 by Magnus, but now just h4, and now basically Levon says that Magnus either goes bishop f4 and gives up the bishop for 2 pawns, which then, you know, this runs into moves like bishop e7, king h6, king g7, f4, bishop f8 check, king f6, and the position is just bad. You know, Levon is gonna slowly but surely. Let's say here, this is a very funny line: bishop e4, d3, rook b8, and now if you push the pawn, then it's just simply mate in 3. Rook b6 check, knight blocks, and it's just mate. So Levon was winning here after bishop h4. So f4. So Magnus tried g5. We have now h takes. Sorry, not h takes. We have bishop f5 first, attacking the rook. Rook to d5. Bishop e7 check. King to e5 now, because here if you go king to g7, it's actually a forced mate. After h takes g5, you would have to give up the rook, but then it's still a forced mate after f6, and I'm not gonna show it, but just so you know, Magnus was getting mated in this position. But after bishop f5, rook d5, bishop e7 check, we have king e5, but now just bishop c5 check, king back to f6, h takes on g5, king takes on g5, and bishop takes on a7, and now Levon is just completely winning. Magnus tried one more idea, d3, but now you see why Levon took on g5 with check. We have bishop e3 check, king f6, bishop d2 now blockading against the passed pawn, and I mean, what are you gonna do here? h5, just simply bishop e4, consolidating. Rook b5 was tried by Magnus, but after g5 check, Magnus resigned the game because there's nothing more to be done here. Here you could maybe play a move like, let's say, king g7, but this would just be, bishop c3 check, and it's either you're getting mated after a move like f6, and bishop takes on f6, this is mate in 7, or you suffer with bishop e5, bishop takes, and rook takes on e5, and I think Levon could win this game up a rook and a bishop. So a very nice game by Levon. Definitely a very crazy game here. Magnus had his chance, maybe his last chance after this rook e8 to play knight c6. But anyways, a very entertaining game, and I really enjoyed it. Hopefully you did too. This was Kowalski, and I'll see you guys in the next one.